didn't understand what was happening. For days, researchers and guards had been complaining about headaches and nausea. Soon, the on-site water purification system broke down. A researcher experienced multiple organ failures, and the on-site hangar completely collapsed, causing the deaths of multiple airmen. What was happening at Area 142? Hi, I'm Dr. Bob, and this is SCP-1440, also known as the Old Man from Nowhere. SCP-1440 has the appearance of a human male, but its ethnicity and age are both unknown. When asked any details about itself or its past, including its name, birth date, or place of birth, SCP-1440 refuses to answer, though it's unknown if it is refusing to give this information, or if it simply does not know the answer to these questions. The aptly nicknamed Old Man from Nowhere appears to be around 80 years old, but in the 50 years that the SCP Foundation has been aware of its existence, SCP-1440 has not shown any signs of aging at all, and it has yet to be determined whether it is aging too slowly for a difference to be perceived in that time, or if it does not age at all, and this is its permanent appearance. But SCP-1440's lack of aging is not even the strangest thing about it. Its true anomalous nature reveals itself once it comes into contact with the human population or any man-made objects, and remains in contact with them for more than a few days. After several days of exposure, an acute adverse effect on anything and everything directly connected to humanity occurs in the vicinity of SCP-1440. Destructive events begin to happen and grow increasingly disastrous until the man-made objects are destroyed or the people in close contact are killed. The only exceptions to these destructive events are SCP-1440 itself and its few possessions, which consist of its clothes, a sack made of unidentified material, a pack of worn playing cards, and a small glass cup. It's unknown whether these objects are somehow protected from the destructive anomalous events, or whether they are not actually man-made items. SCP-1440 seems to be aware of its anomalous effects on human populations and objects, and appears to attempt to avert destruction of them by avoiding human contact as much as possible. However, SCP-1440 is for some reason compelled to travel in what looks like a highly complex pattern, one that always eventually leads to it running into human populations, whether it wants to or not. The particulars of this pattern, both its shape and the reason why SCP-1440 feels compelled to follow it, are as of yet unknown. And just like the other details of its origin, the Old Man from Nowhere has not been able to provide any additional information or help. SCP-1440 has explained that the growing size of the human population and its expansion into previously uninhabited areas has made it harder and harder to avoid contact with humanity, as it follows its complex pattern of movement. SCP-1440 is not actively hostile, nor will it resist or fight back against attempts to contain it. Unfortunately for the SCP Foundation, all attempts to contain SCP-1440 have so far failed. These containment attempts have led to large losses of personnel life and Foundation resources as a result of the destructive anomalous effects that follow SCP-1440. The Old Man from Nowhere first came to the SCP Foundation's attention after SCP-1440 itself approached a Foundation researcher who was on her way to work. SCP-1440 somehow knew that this researcher worked for the Foundation and requested her assistance. When the researcher asked what kind of assistance it was looking for, it replied that it hoped the Foundation would be able to destroy it. It was brought to an SCP Foundation site for further questioning and study, which is where the destructive anomalous effects were first witnessed. The entire site was destroyed, killing multiple site personnel, as well as causing the destruction of 6 safe and Euclid-level SCP objects. So far, all other attempts to contain SCP-1440 have resulted in similar destructive events. SCP-1440 doesn't resist the SCP Foundation's attempts to contain it. During a 4th such attempt by the Foundation, SCP-1440 was brought to Area 142. The Old Man from Nowhere applauded the Foundation's ongoing efforts, but also expressed that it was for the best that it be allowed to leave. as the results for the researchers would be the same as the previous 3 attempts: death for all involved. SCP-1440 told the researcher interviewing it that its first brother had already arrived and was standing behind the researcher. It went on to explain that the brothers are different, but one and the same. They are all cruel, vengeful, and capable of holding a grudge for a long time. They are the cause of SCP-1440's misfortune, and therefore the cause of anyone who comes into contact with it. It then told the researcher that the second brother had arrived, and that time was running short. If it wasn't released soon, then the destruction would start. The researcher asked about the third brother and questioned how much time they had since the third had apparently not yet arrived. SCP-1440 explained that the third, despite being the cruelest of all, never arrives, and that it's actually the appearance of the last brother that will somehow set the old man from nowhere free. SCP-1440 has spent countless months and years searching for the third brother, trying to return something that he won from the other 2. It then made a reference to challenging death itself to a game of cards for its life, and if the researcher is ever in such a situation, they must not do what the old man from nowhere did: win. At that very moment, the on-site nuclear device stored at Area 142 detonated, despite it having multiple failsafes in place that should have made such a detonation impossible. Area 142 was destroyed, and all on-site personnel were killed. SCP-1440 was spotted a week later, over 3,000 kilometers away from Area 142, showing no signs of having experienced any harm. After 3 additional containment attempts were made, and all ended in a similarly disastrous fashion, future attempts to contain SCP-1440 have been suspended indefinitely, until a suitable containment procedure that doesn't involve an unacceptable loss of resources and personnel can be found. Research and analysis of SCP-1440's traveling pattern continues, with a focus on minimizing civilian exposure to it, as does research into a way to hopefully permanently contain it in the future. Unfortunately, SCP-1440's location is currently unknown, and it has been given the object class Keter.
Welcome to the channel. I hope you guys are going to hang around to watch the next 12 episodes of some of my favorite SCPs. Remember to hit the like, subscribe, leave a message on what you'd like to see next.
A text alert. Nothing too surprising about that, but you don't recognize the number. You open the message, and there's no text, just a picture. A strange figure dressed all in black, with a face that looks like the skull of a dog. Who sent this, you think to yourself? Is this a prank? You try to put it out of your mind and go about your day. The next day, there's another message from the same number. You open this one to find the same dog skull-faced creature staring back at you, but this time, you recognize the background. Is that your house he's standing in front of? Now you're getting a little freaked out. Someone is trying to mess with you, you're sure of it. But what can you do? Another couple days pass, and you get another message. You don't need to look to know it's that same number again. You've been getting plenty of these over the last few days. You're really scared now, and you run out of the house to your car. You've got to get out of here. You drive, and while stopped at a light, you decide to finally check this latest message and see what it is. It's the creature again, but this time, it's a picture of him sitting in the back seat of your car. You put your phone down and slowly turn your head. Hi, I'm Dr. Bob, and this is SCP-1471, also known as MALO version 1.0.0. SCP-1471 is a very interesting anomaly that's not really a creature or a monster or even an object. It's a mobile app. It's 9.8 megabytes in size and is freely available in online application stores where it's listed under the name MALO version 1.0.0. There's no developer listed on any of the stores, and it seems as though the app is somehow able to bypass the normal application approval process and appear directly on the stores for wide distribution. Once SCP-1471 is downloaded and installed on a device, there are no icons, shortcuts, or widgets like you'd expect when installing software. It also does not appear on program managers, and once installed, it seems there's no way to remove it. Within 3 to 6 hours of installing the app, the individual whose device it is will begin receiving mysterious picture messages. All of these images will have one thing in common. Somewhere in the foreground or background is a large humanoid figure with a canine-like skull for a head and long black hair. This creature has been designated SCP-1471-A. Sometime during the first 24 hours following the installation of SCP-1471, the individual's device will start to receive slightly different images from before. These images still always contain instances of 1471-A, but now the locations will be recognizable to the individual. These pictures will be of places that the individual regularly frequents, like their local grocery store, their school, or their work. These sorts of images will continue to be received until 48 hours since the initial installation has passed. At that point, the device will start to receive images of places that the individual recently visited, like an image of the restaurant where they picked up their lunch an hour ago. Just as before, all of these images have SCP-1471-A somewhere in them, as if it's been following them and wants them to know it. After 72 hours, things get even stranger. Now the pictures received by the individual will be of them in real time. They might receive a picture of themselves sitting on the couch, taking in that exact moment, except SCP-1471-A is standing right behind them. But when they look, there's nothing there. It's as if someone is photoshopping in this bizarre canid creature, but doing so impossibly fast. Finally, after over 90 hours have passed since the app was installed, the weirdness reaches its peak. The individual no longer receives photo messages, but instead will start to catch glimpses of SCP-1471-A in real life, either in their peripheral vision, in reflective surfaces, or in both. At this point, the individual afflicted will continue having visualizations of SCP-1471-A in the real world, a result that so far has been irreversible. Individuals who have reached this extreme stage of exposure have reported that the entity appears to be trying to visually communicate with them, but none of them have been able to understand or comprehend whatever message it's trying to relay. Such was the case with a subject named William. William had first been exposed to SCP-1471 at 15 years old when his sister, Sarah, showed him an app she had downloaded earlier in the day. The app's description states that you will never have to settle for awkward feelings of being alone ever again. That MALO is an exciting and interactive experience that will keep you engaged and intrigued, and that after just a few hours of MALO, you will soon forget all about those painful emotions of disappointment. Neither William nor his sister knew how the app worked, but they assumed it was tracking them using some kind of GPS, and soon, William was receiving images from SCP-1471. The first one he received was of his school's courtyard, with SCP-1471-A, barely noticeable, sitting on a bench. He had black, matted fur, knife-like claws, a set of blank, pure white eyes, and a face that looked like the skull of a beast with a large, wolfish grin. William was immediately frightened by this, but Sarah insisted it was cute and funny. William wasn't so sure. The pictures continued over the following days, with SCP-1471-A appearing at his school, at his bus stop, on his street, nearly everywhere he went. And then, the pictures started appearing as if they had just been taken the moment they were received. William and Sarah were both being sent the same type of nightmare-inducing images, and they tried to delete the app from their phone to stop them, but they couldn't find where the application was stored. Then, things got even worse. The creature started appearing to William and Sarah in the real world. William, as it turns out, was the lucky one, as SCP-1471-A primarily appeared to him in reflective surfaces like mirrors, which he could cover with a curtain when he didn't want to see the strange dog skull face with its toothy grin staring back at him. Sarah was less fortunate. She saw the creature everywhere she looked, it always appearing just outside of her periphery, catching glimpses out of the corner of her eye, or feeling it looming over her and watching her as she slept. William has been able to cope with the appearances of 1471-A, even regarding it as a somewhat comforting presence at times. Sarah, sadly, was driven mad by the never-ending visions of the creature. Currently, the only known treatment to reverse the effects of SCP-1471 and the appearances of 1471-A is to eliminate the individual's exposure to the images before 90 hours have passed after installing the app. Once those 90 hours have elapsed, though, it is too late, and SCP-1471-A becomes a permanent presence in the individual's life. Thankfully, 1471-A has thus far remained non-hostile and has not been shown to pose a threat to those afflicted by it, at least not a physical threat. All mobile devices that are found to have MALO version 1.0.0 installed on them are to be confiscated and analyzed for any potential information as to who might have created the application, as well as leads for other devices that may have been infected. Following this investigation, the device's batteries are to be removed and the device placed in Storage Unit 91 at Research Site 45. Additionally, all online application stores for mobile devices are to be monitored to prevent unsuspecting users from inadvertently downloading the anomalous software. Any individuals who are suspected of having downloaded SCP-1471 will have their device targeted by a self-uploading malware that can disable it until it's able to be seized by Foundation agents. Due to the unpredictable nature of the anomaly and the potential sentience of the software itself, SCP-1471 has been classified as
New York
Euclid
City.
by the SCP.
11:55 p.m. to be exact. A man is running towards the subway station on 59th Street. He's just gotten off from work at the restaurant where he waits tables, and he's in a hurry to get home and spend some time with his girlfriend. As he approaches the station, he notices something strange. Someone has placed a wooden barrier in front of the entrance. The man has never seen something like this before, but he hasn't lived in Brooklyn very long. Everything about the station looks normal behind the barrier, and he's in a hurry. He doesn't want to have to go several blocks to the next station, so he hops the barrier. What's the worst that could happen? As the man walks onto the train platform, he starts to second-guess his decision. The platform is empty, and come to think of it, he hasn't seen anyone in the station at all. Maybe he did make a mistake. Maybe the station really is closed for repairs. He turns around to leave, but just as he does, he hears a train. Good. Everything is normal. He checks his watch. 11:57 p.m. on the dot. The train comes to a stop, and its doors slide open. It looks a little older than the trains he usually rides, but it appears to be in perfect shape, and it's going the direction of his home, so he steps on board. Just like the station and the platform, there's no one else on the train. Strange, but he's ridden nearly empty trains before, especially late at night, though usually at this time on a Saturday there's at least a few people on board. Just then, he hears something in the station. He turns to see someone running down the platform crying out. "Stop! Stop!" the man in the Mass Transit Authority vest cries, dropping what looks to be his dinner on the platform as he runs. While the MTA worker is still several feet away, the doors snap shut and the train begins to move. The MTA worker cries out again to stop, but he knows there's no point. He watches as the train heads down the tracks and disappears into the darkness. With a sigh, he takes out a walkie-talkie and it squawks to life. "We've lost another one," he says. "Hi, I'm Dr. Bob, and this is SCP-052, also known as the Time-Traveling Train. SCP-052 appears to be a standard-looking Type R4 New York City subway train. Official city records state that the train was built in 1932 and decommissioned for scrap in 1975. Despite the fact that it should no longer exist, SCP-052 continues to appear on the Uptown AD track at the 59th Street and 8th Avenue station at exactly 11:57 p.m. every Saturday night. The train appears to be in perfect condition, just the same as when it was built over 80 years ago, and it is marked as an A train. Each Saturday, the train arrives at exactly the same time, opens its doors to accept or discharge passengers for precisely 5 minutes, then closes its doors and disappears until the next week. Where did the train come from? And where does it go in between the weekly appearances? These are questions the SCP Foundation is trying to answer. But perhaps the most frightening aspect of SCP-052 is that once you get on the train, there's no guarantee of ever getting off. Sadly, the majority of subjects that have been observed boarding SCP-052 have not been heard from again. The rare few that have been recovered claim to have boarded the train on various dates, ranging from 1976 all the way to the year 2204, with the latter claiming he thought he was boarding a special 300th anniversary train. Thus far, none of the recovered passengers have reported any memories or knowledge of their time on board the train between entering and exiting. Any passengers spotted disembarking from SCP-052 are to be immediately brought to Site 21 for questioning to determine their origin and assess whether they pose any threat to the current time stream. The Foundation has had great success administering Class A amnestics to passengers who arrived from the past and reintegrating them into society. But any passenger who is identified as being from the future must be held indefinitely to prevent potential disruptions to this reality's time stream, per Order 69-A1 from O5 Council Member 05-9. There are currently 26 recovered passengers being held at Site 21 who fit this description, and there are not yet any procedures in place that would allow for their safe release into modern society, nor has there been any workable theories for how to return them to their original home time. Despite the protocols in place to prevent public access, some passengers from the present have still managed to accidentally board SCP-052, and subjects from other times continue to appear. Following interviews, it's been discovered that some of these subjects arrived from alternate timelines and realities. This raises the question of whether it is possible for SCP-052 to appear in other times and places, which may require the containment of additional locations, and reports of any suspicious activity involving unscheduled trains are being monitored and investigated around the world. Following its initial discovery, several tests were attempted in order to better understand the anomalous train and what may be happening when it is no longer visible. The first test took place on May 31, 2009. An agent was told to simply board the train. They did as requested and have yet to be recovered as of the present date. A second test took place a week later on June 6th. This agent too was never recovered, though reports indicate that he may have returned to our timeline in 1980, at which point he was killed in a confrontation that has since been classified. A third test was conducted the next week on June 13th. Once again, the agent was told to board the train and did so. This time, though, the agent returned. Just 2 weeks later, on June 27th, the agent stepped back off the train, with his hands appearing to have been surgically removed. A note had been placed in his pocket that had the simple message, "Send no more," written on it. The agent claims not to remember any of his experiences on the train over the 2 weeks he was gone, or what may have happened to his hands. Following this third test, O5 Command issued orders stopping the use of Foundation agents as passengers on SCP-052. D-Class, due to their disposable nature as convicted felons and death row inmates, were considered as potential replacements for the agents in the exploration of SCP-052, but the risk of releasing them into the past or the future was determined to be too great. Other than the agent who knowingly boarded the train, several other notable passengers have been recovered. One case involved the recovery of a woman who entered the train on July 14, 2012, but was recovered 4 years earlier, on March 8, 2008. She entered the train while on her way home from the theater, and was surprised to learn she traveled 4 years into the past. Because another version of her existed at the time she was recovered, she was held to prevent unwanted temporal effects. Another subject was recovered in 2008 who claimed to be from the year 1976. Although there was nothing physically wrong with him and no risk of time stream disruptions, Foundation psychiatrists recommended that he be held indefinitely, as 32 years was believed to be too long a period of time to successfully reintegrate into society. Perhaps the most interesting recovery was of a man claiming to be a Level 4 supervisor from the SCP Federation, who boarded the train in December of 2124. He said that he had been administered a Class A amnestic prior to boarding, and remembered nothing until his recovery in 2010. While the agent can clearly never be released into society, O5 Command has approved the sharing of classified information about various anomalies, in the hopes that he can provide additional information on possible containment procedures. Because SCP-052 has so far proven impossible to stop or remove from the New York City subway system, it has been classified as Euclid. But its predictable nature means that the Foundation is usually able to prevent the public from encountering it. The 59th Street ABCD station is closed to the public between 11 p.m. on Saturday night and 1 a.m. on Sunday morning, under the pretext of track maintenance. Any passengers seen leaving SCP-052 must be taken to Site 21 for debriefing and processing, and members of the public who simply see SCP-052 may be released after the administration of a Class B amnestic. As for what happens to most of the passengers who board SCP-052 and are never seen from again, we simply don't know. High in the Andes Mountains, two miners chip away at the rock with their mining picks in search of precious minerals when something strange happens. They hit an impenetrable wall. As they dust off the unbreakable surface they've reached, they see that it's a mirrored sheet of some strange metal. They start to break away the rock around it, revealing more and more of the shiny metallic surface, until it suddenly disappears as if by magic. Behind it is a chamber with strange machinery and a mysterious metallic ball inside. The two miners look at each other in disbelief. What on earth had they just discovered? Hi, I'm Dr. Bob, and this is SCP-163, also known as an old castaway. The Foundation soon caught word of the bizarre object that had been unearthed in the Andes Mountains and immediately sent agents to secure the site. When they arrived, they found the metallic sphere was still there, though approximately 30% of the machinery originally reported to have been in the chamber had been looted before they could get there. Based on analysis of the rock strata in which it was found, the chamber appeared to be many, many years old, and tests on the minerals present showed signs of a shock wave, indicating that whatever this was, it had crash-landed into the mountains. Upon examination of the metallic sphere, the agents found that it was a kind of machine, and one with a relatively simplistic interface. The agents deactivated the machine and were met with an amazing discovery. The mirrored ball was actually a kind of shield, and inside was something incredible, a creature that could only be described as extraterrestrial, and it was soon to be designated SCP-163. The alien immediately lashed out at the agents, but they were able to subdue it and transport it back to a Foundation containment site for further investigation. SCP-163 is like nothing that has ever been seen on this planet. It stands 2 meters tall and is 1.5 meters wide. Its body is roughly cylindrical, with a circular mouth on its lower body and something that resembles a head on top. It has 8 legs, each with 3 joints that are arranged radially around the middle of its body. It also has multiple specialized limbs, including 2 prehensile apparatus on either side of its mouth to assist with feeding, 2 arms just below the head area that are capable of finer movement and the delicate manipulation of objects, 2 larger arms just above its legs that are used for the manipulation of heavy objects, as well as self-defense, and the remains of 2 appendages also near the mouth that appear to have been amputated at some point prior to its discovery. 30 centimeters from the top of SCP-163's head is a single semi-compound eye, which wraps all the way around its head, giving it complete 360-degree vision. The eye is separated into 88 separate units and is sensitive to ultraviolet C light, a short wavelength light that's harmful to most life on Earth. Its skin is transparent when exposed to the wavelengths of light that humans can see, but turns opaque under ultraviolet light. The strange properties of SCP-163 don't stop with what's on the outside. Tests of the creature's green-colored blood have revealed that it processes oxygen and carbon dioxide similar to many creatures on Earth, but its circulatory system is nickel-based, as opposed to the iron or copper-based systems used by most terrestrial organisms. It also has an endoskeleton composed of tissue that's similar to cellulose, the substance that plant cell walls are made of. And its cells use DNA for instructions just like human cells do, with the same ACGT bases, but SCP-163 interprets those instructions differently from the way human cells do. All of these differences mean that SCP-163's home environment must be radically different from Earth's, with different types of proportions of elements present. Certain elements that are perfectly safe for humans are dangerous to SCP-163, and vice versa. Tests have shown that while it's able to survive in our atmosphere unaided, it will begin to show signs of illness after 1 hour. In order to stay alive, it's vital that SCP-163 continues to possess and maintain the universal life support device that was discovered with it, designated SCP-163-1. The device is able to convert basic chemical elements into subsistence for 163, as well as projecting the protective metallic shield that it was found encased in. The other technology recovered from alongside SCP-163 has yet to be fully understood, though research is ongoing. The technology is surprisingly low-tech, with much of it consisting of transistors assembled into analog computers with seemingly varied purposes. The processes these computers appear to be modeling do not match up with any known scientific processes, and it's theorized that they have something to do with 163's life support. It's still not known how or if it communicates complex ideas. When in certain states, it produces a steady sinusoidal wave at approximately 15 Hz that can last anywhere from 15 seconds to 10 minutes, and personnel that have been exposed to the sound have reported experiencing feelings of paranoia and are recommended to remain in well-lit conditions until the feeling subsides. SCP-163's main way of expressing emotion appears to be with the lump of tissue above its compound eye, and depending on how it feels, it will furrow its brow in a number of different ways. It has also been shown to display a positive response to something by rapidly beating its delicate upper arms together, and a negative response by doing the same with its two powerful lower arms. SCP-163 is to be contained in an enclosure with rooms for living, dining, work, and sleep, as well as a receiving room with an airlock and seating that's appropriate for both 163 and a human researcher. The air in the enclosure is to be filtered and regularly checked for impurities, and there are two lighting systems, one that produces light within the human visible spectrum, and one producing ultraviolet light. Personnel are to wear isolation suits at all times when in the enclosure, to protect both themselves and SCP-163 from cross-contamination. Surprisingly, SCP-163, which has been classified as safe, is also free to leave its enclosure, provided it don its own isolation suit first, and is escorted by a researcher at all times. A number of experiments have been performed in an attempt to communicate with SCP-163, as well as determine its level of intelligence. In one test, a number of cards with images printed on them that depicted various human expressions and emotions were shown to 163. It did not appear to recognize any of them, but it did hold the 18th image shown up over the presiding researcher's faceplate. In another, it was given a test to see whether it was capable of selflessness and would offer help if given the chance. A researcher brought two wooden blocks and a box into 163's enclosure. The researcher opened the box and placed one block inside before closing the box. The researcher then tried to place the other block inside the box, acting as if they were struggling and couldn't figure out why the block wouldn't go inside the closed box. After watching for 10 seconds, SCP-163 assisted the researcher and opened the box, a result consistent with how human children behave when given the same test. But the most unexpected result of all came when a researcher brought a canvas, brushes, and a selection of ultraviolet-colored paints to 163's enclosure. 163 immediately began painting after being shown how, and soon produced a painting of an alien landscape with never-before-seen plants and animals. SCP-163 stared at the painting it had produced for 7 minutes before seeming to become angry, knocking the painting to the floor and retreating to a corner of its room. It furrowed the tissue on its head, indicating distress, and all attempts at communicating with it failed. That is, until the researcher tried to remove the painting supplies, at which point SCP-163 beat its heavy arms together to indicate its unhappiness. The next day, the researcher brought more painting supplies, and SCP-163 continues to paint imagery of what is presumably its home alien planet. It's truly amazing and lucky that SCP-163 was discovered. The Foundation is now monitoring all excavations of rock strata that are of similar age to the one 163 was discovered in. Perhaps one day another extraterrestrial will be discovered, offering 163 potentially a way home, or, at the very least, a friend.
9, 8.
A mysterious, happy-sounding voice is counting down as a young man runs across a rotating beam. He is cut and bruised, leaving a trail of blood behind him as he struggles to reach the finish line.
7, 6, 5.
He hops onto the final platform. As a spinning saw blade comes buzzing out of the wall, he drops to the floor, moments before it takes off his head.
4, 3,
He stands up and sprints towards the end of this nightmare competition. The man leaps through the air, his arm outstretched towards the buzzer.
1, 0. Time's up.
The announcer cries a split second before the man slaps the final buzzer. The lights go out, and the announcer's voice suddenly changes. It loses its clown-like quality and takes on a much more sinister tone.
Looks like no winners this time. Now, it's time for your punishment.
Hi, I'm Dr. Bob, and this is SCP-024, also known as the Game Show of Death. SCP-024 is an abandoned soundstage, which is a hangar-like structure that's normally used for the production of film and television projects. This specific soundstage has been abandoned for a number of years, though it's not known at this time if the anomalous properties it demonstrates had manifested before or after its abandonment. The anomalous location was first discovered by a group of teenagers who had illegally broken into the compound on which the soundstage is located. Only one of the teenagers who entered the soundstage returned, and the report she made to local police detailing her experience was more than enough to tip off the SCP Foundation that something was amiss. The Foundation immediately began mobilizing agents, and once the site was secured, a number of test groups were sent into SCP-024 to learn more about what was happening inside. From those groups, we now know that upon entering SCP-024, visitors are greeted by an announcer who is so far yet to be seen or otherwise identified. The announcer communicates with the visitors via an intercom system and will listen and respond back to visitors as well. The announcer refers to those who enter SCP-024 as contestants and informs them that they will be participating in a game show with the opportunity to win fabulous prizes. The contestants are given fair warning, though, that the game will be extremely dangerous and that only winners will be allowed to leave. At this point, the contestants are presented with the choice of whether to participate or not. Those who decline the offered terms are immediately expelled from SCP-024, and their re-entry is blocked by an invisible barrier. Those who choose to stay are then led further into the soundstage, to where they will participate in the actual game. The specific aesthetics and composition of the game changes with each new group of contestants, but the essence always remains the same. A long and elaborate obstacle course that must be navigated through. The precise rules also vary, with some games only allowing for a single winner, while others encourage the players to work together and form teams. The obstacles can range from relatively easy and safe challenges to life-threatening tests of skill. As the contestants make their way through the unusual obstacle course, the announcer will continually talk to them, giving them updates on other contestants, advice on how to progress, adjusting rules on the fly, or even conversing with the contestant directly. As the game goes on, the obstacles become more and more deadly and difficult to overcome. This has led to the not-so-rare occurrence of there being no winners, with the entire pool of contestants having been killed or otherwise incapacitated by the various challenges. In these instances, the announcer will express his disappointment at there not being a winner, and SCP-024 appears to shut down, going dark until another group of contestants enter. Before beginning the game, the contestants are briefed on a number of rules, such as no assaulting the other contestants and no deliberate bypassing of obstacles. In the event that a rule is broken, the announcer will call out the offending contestant, and they are forcefully removed from the game by the studio guardians, who act as the physical enforcers of SCP-024's rules. The studio guardians can suddenly appear and disappear from anywhere inside SCP-024. Their exact look varies based on the theme of the obstacle course, but they always maintain a humanoid appearance, exhibit superhuman strength, and wear a mask or headgear that fully hides their face. Strangely, winners of the game have later reported that while inside the game, the studio guardians appear only as gigantic, shadowy figures that would engulf offending contestants and then disappear. Should one or more persons complete the obstacle course and abide by the rules that were set out by the announcer, they are declared to be the winner and the recipient of a grand prize. Prizes have included cash, electronics, cars, collectibles, and even fully paid vacations to a variety of cities and countries. The type of prize awarded seems to be completely random, and examination of the prizes collected has shown them all to be genuine, with no unusual characteristics or anomalous properties. Those who did not complete the obstacle course are announced to be losers, and the lights within SCP-024 are then switched off. The winners will find themselves outside the soundstage with their prize, while the losers are never seen or heard from again. Attempts to track where the losers go or what happens to them have all failed. GPS locator beacons placed on test groups lost their signals as soon as the game ended, and it is unknown whether this is because they were destroyed or because they were taken somewhere that blocked the signals. Perhaps the strangest aspect of SCP-024 is what happens after the game show has ended. Outside of the soundstage is a mailbox, and following the completion of a game, whether a winner was crowned or not, a VHS tape or DVD containing a recording of the entire game will appear. This is despite winners claiming to not see any cameras present while inside. Even more bizarre is the studio audience that can be seen on the recording watching the game and cheering on the contestants. Just like the cameras, winners have reported that there was no one present but the other contestants while they were inside SCP-024. The announcer also remains a mystery. During a test group which consisted solely of a Foundation researcher who conversed with the announcer, it became clear that it is both sentient and aware of events that take place in the outside world. As the researcher was the only contestant present, the announcer did not start the game, and instead engaged in a conversation with the researcher. Most of the topics were centered around pop culture, and it's hypothesized that SCP-024's only means of learning about the outside world may be through television sources, though attempts to test this theory by cutting lines and removing satellite dishes from the soundstage roof have not shown to have an impact on what the announcer knows. When it became clear that the Foundation researcher would be the only contestant at that time, the announcer politely asked them to leave and recommended that they return with additional contestants at a later date. SCP-024's nature means that it can't be moved to a secure location, and it has been classified as Euclid. It has been determined that the best way to safely secure SCP-024 is to conceal its location. 5 identical-looking sound stages have been built around it, and a security perimeter around the complex is maintained at all times. None of the security team members are told which is the real SCP-024, and to further prevent accidental entry, its entrance has been sealed by reinforced blast doors. Only D-Class personnel are now allowed to enter SCP-024 as test groups participating in the competition, and Foundation researchers may only observe remotely. Any attempts by Foundation personnel to enter SCP-024 without prior approval from a Level 4 researcher will lead to immediate apprehension, and termination of the offender has been authorized. In the event that containment is breached, or if the true nature of SCP-024 is compromised, the entire complex is to be immediately destroyed by the specialized demolition charges that are placed throughout the containment area. A young man tosses and turns in bed. He adjusts his pillow and tries sleeping on his back, his side, his stomach, but nothing works. He rolls over to check the time, 3 a.m. This is the 3rd night in a row he hasn't been able to fall asleep. He feels tired. He wants to sleep. But every time he closes his eyes and sleep starts to creep in, something happens. And suddenly, he's wide awake again. It's as if someone keeps flipping a switch in his brain to awake, and there's nothing he can do to stop it. It's affecting everything in his life. He can't concentrate in class, his work performance goes down the drain. Even his hobbies become completely unenjoyable. All he wants to do is sleep. His friends and family can tell something is wrong. It's as if he has become a different person, and they urge him to go see a doctor. But the doctors tell him there's nothing they can do for him. He's perfectly healthy otherwise. He should try some natural remedies like valerian root and get more exercise. He has no idea how many days he's been awake now. 4, 5, maybe more. At this point, the lack of sleep isn't even the worst part. It's the hallucinations. Sometimes they're just a shadow dancing outside of his vision, but others are incredibly vivid, feeling more real than his now dreary life does. He had to stop going to work and class entirely since he can't concentrate for more than a couple of seconds at a time. His friends don't want anything to do with him, and who can blame them? He has uncontrollable mood swings and lashes out for no reason. He's tried every sleep remedy there is. He took the doctor's advice and exercised as hard as he ever has. But with never being able to sleep, he has no energy left. He's becoming a living zombie. He gets up out of bed but loses his balance and collapses to the floor. He tries to get up, but he can't. He'll just lie there for a while. He starts to drift away, and he readies himself for the jolt that always wakes him back up. But this time, it doesn't come. The wave of sleep that starts to wash over him feels different this time, though. It's heavier, more peaceful, and more permanent. Hi, I'm Dr. Bob, and this is
New Fancy Feast Savory Cravings. Tender break-apart treats in savory flavors your cat will love. New Fancy Feast Savory Cravings. Discover a new way to treat.
SCP-966, also known as Sleep Killer. SCP-966 is the designation that the SCP Foundation has given to a creature that belongs to a group of anomalous predatory beasts, standing 1.4 to 1.6 meters tall and weighing roughly 30 kilograms. These hairless humanoids have an elongated face, a mouth full of pointed needle-like teeth, and each of their hands has 5 razor-sharp claws that can be up to 20 centimeters in length. Though unlike humans and apes, they are digitigrade, meaning that they walk using only their toes. But you won't be able to see the horrible visage of SCP-966 under normal circumstances, as they are only visible under very specific lighting conditions. They can only be viewed under light that has a wavelength between roughly 700 and 900 nanometers, which is just at the edge of the light spectrum that's visible to humans, stretching into what's known as infrared light. The only exception to this is if their skin, muscles, or organs have suffered from 2nd or 3rd degree burns, in which case, the affected areas of their body will show up under a greater spectrum of wavelengths that are visible to the human eye. Though frightening to look at, SCP-966 are actually quite weak physically, with very low muscular density. Their bones are hollow, similar to birds, and while their claws may be incredibly sharp, they are also easily broken, making them unsuited for use in combat. Additionally, they do not rest through sleep, but will, at seemingly random times, stop all movement and fall into a rest period that lasts roughly 3 to 5 minutes, after which they are able to resume their normal behavior. With all of these physical shortcomings, how did SCP-966 gain a reputation as such a fearsome hunter? The secret lies in their ability to emit bursts of a previously unknown type of wave. Hunting either alone or in pairs, SCP-966 uses this wave to inhibit its prey's ability to enter any of the restful sleep stages, and also stops the ability to microsleep. These waves have been observed to be effective at up to 20 meters, though tests have shown that they can be blocked by post-transition metals, of which lead appears to be especially effective. SCP-966 hunts and feeds on medium to large-sized animals, which includes humans, and once their quarry has been targeted by the sleep-inhibiting waves, the effect is permanent, with no method having yet been discovered that will allow them to regain the ability to sleep. Experiments have shown that unconsciousness can be induced in other ways, such as with the use of general anesthesia, though these methods have ultimately proven to be ineffective, since although the victim is unconscious, they are still not receiving any of the restful benefits of sleep while in that state. The effects of sleep deprivation on humans, both mentally and physically, are devastating. Symptoms can begin setting in after just 24 hours that can include mood swings, memory issues, and sensory impairment. After 2 to 3 days, the body's hormones become deregulated, and bodily functions like hunger, thirst, and temperature fluctuate wildly as cognitive abilities start to dramatically decline. Hallucinations, paranoia, and fits of rage are common, and the risk of death from sleep deprivation increases with each day that passes without sleep. And this is exactly what SCP-966 wants. After surreptitiously sending a burst of sleep deprivation waves at their victim, they will then stalk their prey until lack of sleep finally leads to total incapacitation, at which point SCP-966 consumes them. SCP-966 have proven to be both extremely quiet and agile when hunting. However, they have actually been observed intentionally making threatening noises around their prey, presumably to further increase their already elevated stress levels, and potentially hastening their mental degradation. On rare occasions, they will even physically assault their victim to further degenerate their mental and physical health. Some of SCP-966's prey will experience especially intense hallucinations and bouts of rage, which is theorized to be caused by prolonged exposure to multiple instances of their sleep-stopping waves. Why some victims are exposed to multiple waves when a single instance has been shown to be 100% effective is unknown, and it's hypothesized that they may only engage in this behavior when especially hungry, to try and speed up the process, though others have put forth the theory that SCP-966 may take some perverse form of joy in seeing its victims suffer prior to expiring. Wild instances of SCP-966 have been found across the globe, and while the SCP Foundation has been successful in thinning their numbers, they still exist in high enough numbers to pose a serious threat to humanity. For these reasons, they have been assigned the classification Euclid. Mobile Task Forces Iota-1 and Iota-2, codenamed the Dream Hunters and Air Chasers respectively, are continually monitoring for any reports of sudden or violent deaths related to sleep deprivation in order to identify and neutralize the remaining instances of wild SCP-966. 4 SCP-966 specimens, 3 males and 1 female, have been acquired by the Foundation, and they are currently contained in a 10 by 10 meter room that is lined with lead and equipped with infrared security cameras. Each specimen is fed 20 kilograms of meat each month, and in the event that the female specimen gives birth, the new specimen is to be taken for observation and study before being disposed of prior to reaching maturity. It's day 9 of Joseph Mann's expedition into the extreme wilderness of Antarctica. He's been following the tracks of a mysterious creature, a massive, anomalous beast that has been spotted in the snowy wastes. As he follows the tracks, he sees something. It's his own tent, but he had been walking for days after leaving this camp. How was he back here after only a few hours? Time and distance were starting to feel off, like they were stretched out and folded over into knots. Maybe he was confused about the tracks. Maybe he hadn't been chasing after something, but following the tracks of something that had been chasing him. Maybe he was wrong about everything. Hi, I'm Dr. Bob, and this is SCP-2764, also known as the Eldritch Antarctic. SCP-2764 is a massive biological entity, standing over 380 meters tall and estimated to weigh over 150,000 metric tons. It possesses around 80 tentacle-like arms that it uses for movement and simple actions like grasping objects. It also has what looks to be a head with 4 eyes. SCP-2764 possesses a number of anomalous properties, including the ability to communicate telepathically with humans, though the language used changes based on the person who is receiving its messages. Strangely, this communication appears to go one way only, as it has never demonstrated that it understands any attempts to communicate back to it. Its physical state has also been observed to be quite anomalous. Its size does not follow normal Euclidean geometry, with the creature appearing many times larger or smaller than it should, based on the viewer's distance from SCP-2764. There appears to be a critical zone lying roughly 50 kilometers away from the creature that stretches around it in a circle. As you move away from the creature and approach this line, SCP-2764 actually appears to grow larger until the critical zone is passed, at which point it begins to shrink as you move farther and farther away. Its body has a number of other strange properties too. Its tentacle-like arms rapidly translocate around its body at random intervals, jumping around all over its body, creating a twitchy, writhing mass that makes it impossible to count how many tentacles it actually possesses. But perhaps strangest of all is that not only do the creature's arms seem to break the laws of physics by jumping around its body, but so too does the entirety of SCP-2764. It's been observed to spontaneously relocate itself to different places, as if it is flickering in and out of existence. It appears that the creature flickers into a new place like this at random intervals, but it may be following some yet unknown rules, as it has never been seen appearing more than 25 kilometers away from where it was last seen, and always flickers back to its original location within 48 hours. SCP-2764 was first discovered by a civilian team that was conducting detailed surveys of the Antarctic landscape. The team observed the creature and were immediately alarmed by its strange properties, especially its bizarre geometric qualities. They returned to their home base and described what they had seen to a colleague. who was actually an SCP Foundation researcher in charge of investigating anomalous activity in Antarctica. This researcher sent word back to his superiors, who activated Mobile Task Force Eta-5, also known as the Jaeger bombers. Eta-5 administered amnestics to the survey team and any other exposed civilians before setting up a perimeter around SCP-2764. What they would eventually learn was that the perimeter they established was far too close. In his investigation logs, MTF Eta-5 Commander Joseph Mann noted that he immediately experienced strange anomalous effects, such as how the creature seemed to shrink the closer he got to it, and the strange voices in his head. His curiosity soon got the better of him, and he decided to do some of his own research into the entity before the rest of the SCP Foundation scientists and guards arrived to take over the investigation. Mann gathered a couple volunteers who were also curious about the nature of the anomaly and set out on an expedition to gather more information. Just as they had experienced before, the more they walked towards the creature, the more it appeared to shrink in size. They also made note of strange prints in the snow. At first, they looked to be human prints, but then seemed to change into something that looked as if a squid had pulled itself onto the land and was dragging itself through the snow. After several days, the whole team was hearing voices. They also realized they had left their tissue analyzer back at a previous camp and would have to backtrack to retrieve it. As they moved away from the creature, they expected it to now increase in size, but it didn't. It stayed the same. Either something had changed about the anomaly, or SCP-2764 was moving towards them. After recovering the tissue analyzer, they continued on towards the creature again. Commander Mann began to understand the voices he was hearing and could even make out certain words like snow and back. Their perception of time was affected too. Hours seemed to stretch out or pass by in the blink of an eye. The voice he was hearing started to become more direct, and the message was clear: turn back. Mann was compelled to press on, though, even with the extremes of the Antarctic cold beginning to weigh on him. But then, SCP-2764 suddenly vanished, flickering out of existence, and the team was left with no choice but to follow the strange tentacle-like tracks in the snow, hoping they would lead to the creature. The tracks led them back to their old tent, the same one they had left the tissue analyzer at before, which should have been impossible based on the time and distance they had walked. Just then, Commander Mann realized that he had been wrong. They were the ones who had been pursued. They hadn't been following the tracks forward, but backwards to where they had been. Even worse, he realized that his team had disappeared. He was completely alone. Commander Mann continued to trudge through the snow, walking without direction, when he spotted SCP-2764 again. It was circling him, trying to maintain its distance, but he raced towards the creature and sliced off a piece of its flesh for analysis. Something strange happened when he placed it in the analyzer, though. The machine displayed a 0, which was the reading for human tissue. This strange result required further analysis from the Foundation researchers who should now have arrived to take over the investigation, so Mann began to make his way back in the direction of home. He spotted what looked to be members of his team off in the distance, and assumed that they must be on a mission to rescue him. Try as he might, though, the spatial anomalies prevented him from ever getting closer. It felt like it would take him an entire day just to walk a few feet. He assumed it must be the same for his rescuers as he watched them off in the distance, seeming to never get closer. At one point, he could even see as they stopped and turned back, appearing to return to an old campsite. He couldn't understand what they were doing, but then they disappeared entirely, only to reappear much closer to him. Commander Mann, now sure that there was something terribly wrong happening, tried to approach the now single rescuer he could see to tell him to turn back, but before he could, the man rushed at him with a knife and cut a piece of his flesh from his back. It's at that point that Commander Mann finally started to understand. He hadn't been watching a rescue team come for him. He'd been watching himself. He had been walking towards the creature, and yet, at the same time, he had also always been the creature. Commander Mann was trapped in a time loop where he was doomed to transform into the monstrous SCP-2764 and then watch himself meet the same fate over and over again, forever. The voices he had been hearing telling him to turn back were his own, words of warning that he was doomed to always ignore. SCP-2764 has been classified as Keter and is currently located in a classified area of Antarctica, A 150-kilometer radius has been established around the object, which is to be monitored at all times by Mobile Task Force Eta 5. Any civilians that come within the 150-kilometer radius, either by accident or due to SCP-2764 flickering to a populated area, are to be administered Class A amnestics, and any civilians that may have knowledge of the event are to be administered Class B amnestics. Should any civilian or Foundation employees come within 30 kilometers of SCP-2764, they are to be detained and immediately questioned. Following their psychological examination, and depending on the results of the evaluation, they will either be administered Class A amnestics or terminated. Two men walk through a hot, dusty tunnel carved right into the rock. Their torches cast just enough light to see that the walls are covered with strange hieroglyphics. They've been in many tombs before, but they've never seen markings like these before. They spot something up ahead, a person slumped against the wall. One of the men rushes over and sees that whoever this was, they've been here a very long time. Nothing is left but bones and a few scraps of cloth. As the man examines the skeleton, his partner calls him over. There's something he has to see. He's looking through a hole in the tunnel wall, and on the other side is an enormous cavern. In the middle of the giant room is the strangest sight either man has ever seen. An enormous upside-down pyramid that stretches down from the roof of the cave. They look at each other in amazement before running down deeper into the tunnel, sure that it will lead them to the pyramid and the incredible treasures it must have inside. They can see through more holes in the tunnel wall that they are getting closer and closer to the pyramid. Finally, they reach an entrance into the uppermost and widest part of the structure. As they enter the upside-down pyramid, they see that the passages are at least twice as high as any they've ever seen, and are covered with more of the strange markings. They start walking through the passageway, and soon realize that there are numerous twists, turns, branching paths, and dead ends. It's a maze. The man turns to tell his friend that they should consider leaving and coming back with others, but he finds that he's all alone. They must have gotten separated at some point. He starts backtracking through the passages, turning this way and that, trying to retrace his steps. He abruptly stops, though, when he hears a strange noise. A metallic grinding sound fills the air. The man watches as the walls themselves start to move, shifting and rearranging themselves. Without warning, the open passage in front of him closes, sealing his path back. The man begins to scream. There's no answer to his cries. Panicked, he runs deeper and deeper into the maze, but try as he might, he can't find his friend, or the exit. How long has he been walking? Hours? Days? He can remember hearing the walls shift at least one other time. Exhausted, he sits down against the wall. He'll just take a little rest. Then it's back to work. He must be able to find his way out. He must escape. Hi, I'm Dr. Bob, and this is SCP-875. Also known as War Criminals. SCP-875 is the designation the SCP Foundation has given to a massive underground pyramid whose exact location is a closely guarded secret. As of yet, no record of the pyramid's construction has been found in any historical documents, though there is evidence that suggests SCP-875 is a man-made structure. While the outside of SCP-875 is made of normal sandstone like the pyramids of Egypt, there is an inner layer composed of a metal alloy that is yet to be identified. The first floor of SCP-875 is accessible through a tunnel and contains a number of passageways that appear to have been built for entities much taller than humans. These passages are arranged into a maze-like configuration, complete with double backs and dead ends. Adding to the confusion is that the geography of the maze periodically changes. Mechanisms located within the walls and floor activate automatically every 48 hours, completely changing the layout. While anyone unlucky enough to be trapped within the shifting walls of SCP-875 may find themselves unable to leave by the path they entered, there are a number of hidden pressure plates and levers that can be found throughout the labyrinth that open up sections of the wall, creating new paths and shortcuts. But these switches also cause the release of what the Foundation has designated SCP-875-1. SCP-875-1 are small, flying insect-like creatures, approximately 6 centimeters long, with a mass of roughly 3 grams. They bear no resemblance to any known species of insect on Earth, suggesting that their origin may be extraterrestrial. When released, SCP-875-1s will swarm the nearest person, stinging them mercilessly. Their sting is highly acidic and causes severe damage to nerves and tendons. And this potent acid, combined with their tendency to swarm, has resulted in victims' limbs becoming what can only be described as liquefied. Previous uses of explosives within the pyramid have left openings to a lower second floor that are relatively easy to access, provided that the maze's current configuration allows the breaches to be reached. The main feature of the second floor is 4 large vats, each of which contains a clear liquid similar in appearance to normal water that has been designated SCP-8752. When humans are exposed to SCP-8752, they experience effects similar to an amnestic, but with the added sensation of feeling both happy and satisfied. Following what look like maintenance tunnels on the second floor leads down to a 3rd floor of the pyramid that is home to a large nuclear reactor. The reactor takes up most of the area of this level of the pyramid and appears to be self-cooling, with no evidence of a meltdown or other nuclear disaster having taken place. This reactor seems to be powering the rest of the pyramid, including the maze reorganizing mechanisms on the 1st floor, as well as what's hidden on the mysterious lowest level of SCP-875. Although there is no direct access to the 4th floor of the pyramid, tunneling through the floor of the 3rd level has revealed something incredible. Inside a small room are what look to be 10 separate cryogenic stasis chambers. The chambers are arranged in a circular formation, and strangest of all, they're all occupied. Inside each pod is a large insectoid creature roughly 3 meters tall and weighing 240 kilograms that have been designated SCP-8753. 3 of the creatures appear to have died from their stasis chambers failing at some point in the past, and heavy decomposition has set in. Several other of the insectoid creatures are heavily damaged, though it is unknown if this is due to issues with the pods, or if they had sustained injuries prior to entering stasis. While it is not known what exactly these creatures are, where they came from, or if their origin is even terrestrial, examination and analysis of some of the images carved into the walls of SCP-875's 1st floor have provided interesting information. In one, 2 figures that bear a resemblance to SCP-8753 are depicted facing each other, with one appearing to be stabbing the other with a spear, implying some kind of violent conflict in the past. In the next, another figure that looks like SCP-8753 is shown presenting a stone slab to what looks to be a human dressed in the garb of ancient Egypt. The Egyptian is facing away from the insectoid, which might suggest a breakdown in communication or an unwillingness of the Egyptian to listen to the insectoid. The 3rd image, though, shows 2 humanoid figures now bowing to the insectoid figure, next to an image of a chalice with a drop of liquid falling into it. This may represent SCP-8752, the amnestic liquid, and the way its effects were used to subdue this group of people. This hypothesis is further strengthened by a 4th image that shows an insectoid figure watching 2 humanoids pulling what looks like a large stone block with ropes. A 5th image shows the insectoid figure standing next to what looks like a dead humanoid, consuming a part of it. And finally, a 6th image depicts the insectoid inside of a small rectangle that may represent the stasis chambers found on the lowest level of the pyramid. Are these entities sleeping inside the stasis chambers the same ones depicted on the walls of the pyramid? Did they arrive on Earth and subjugate a group of humans, forcing them to build a monument that could contain their stasis chambers and keep them in a form of perennial living death? Perhaps this question has been answered by a mysterious transmission that was detected by the Foundation. Coming from an unknown source, the transmission was in English, but the grammar and word choice sounded like it was from someone who had only the most basic understanding of the language. The transmission, in no uncertain terms, demanded the return of the war criminals, and that if they were not returned, that 95% of the species would be made extinct. It then went on to describe a number of offenses perpetrated by these war criminals, including claims of massacres and cannibalism. Were the creatures in the bottom of SCP-875 convicts on the run, war criminals from another planet or even another reality, who had fled to Earth to escape justice? It may never be known for sure, as the message degraded and became unintelligible before it could finish. Due to its stable location and the relative ease with which the public can be kept away from it, SCP-875 has been classified as safe. Its location is marked as a military base on maps, with satellite images altered according to Procedure Watson 24. Civilians who approach the area are to be taken into Foundation custody and administered Class A amnestics. Research personnel are only allowed inside SCP-875 when accompanied by 2 security staff, and 6 maintenance personnel are to monitor the nuclear reactor at all times. If any staff are stung by instances of SCP-8751, they are to be treated on-site by medical personnel with alkali to neutralize the acidic stings. And in extreme cases, amputation of the affected limbs is authorized. In the event that an SCP-8753 specimen becomes active, security personnel are to subdue them in a non-fatal manner if possible, and transport them to a secure site for further research. It's 1916, right in the middle of World War I, and a British soldier is huddled in a trench, occasionally peeking over the top. He's supposed to be on watch, but there's little to see in the darkness that hangs over no man's land. But then, he spots something big. It's a shadowy figure, only about 20 feet away, and it looks like it's digging in the mud. It's too dark to make out what he's looking at, so the soldier shoots a flare into the sky, lighting up the battlefield with a dull red light. Now he can see it clearly, and it's like nothing he's ever seen before. A huge, terrifying monster, picking up bodies out of the mud. The soldier can only stare, petrified by what he's seeing in front of him, when the creature suddenly turns to stare back at him and smiles. Hi, I'm Dr. Bob, and this is SCP-3456, also known as the ORCADAIN Horseman. SCP-3456 is the designation given to a group of quadrupeds, of which the exact number that exists is unknown. These entities resemble horses, though with some marked differences. SCP-3456s lack any hair, and their thick skin is translucent, revealing the fat and muscle underneath. They have 3-toed hooves, and strangest of all, they have 1 or more human-shaped torsos fused to their backs. Each torso has a pair of arms and a head, but no legs, the torso seeming to meld directly into the back of the creature's horse-like body. The arms are much longer than those of a human, with a total wingspan that is double the anomaly's height. The arms are so long, they typically drag along the ground when the creature moves. At the end of each arm are 5 sharpened bones that protrude from where fingers would normally be. Instead of a nose, most instances of SCP-3456 have a hole in the middle of the face, which is capable of producing a high-pitched scream that is as loud as a jet engine. SCP-3456 instances vary in size, with the largest recorded manifestation standing 30 meters tall and 15 meters long. Their bodies have also shown to be quite resilient and are completely impervious to conventional weaponry. The anomalous creatures have displayed a high level of adaptive intelligence, using complex tactics like setting up ambushes through the use of property destruction and psychological manipulation to lure targets into traps. This high level of intelligence has led many at the Foundation to believe that SCP-3456 is sapient. Any direct observation of an SCP-3456 instance will cause the entity to become aware of its observer, at which point it will display this awareness by turning in the exact direction of the observer. Once an instance of SCP-3456 has spotted its observer, it will engage in predatory behavior, stalking its witness and pursuing them far beyond the initial site of manifestation, all the while concealing itself and using camouflage as it chases them. SCP-3456 will repeat this behavior over and over, intentionally letting itself be seen by observers over and over as it hunts down and takes each one, until it has captured a large number of individuals and suddenly dematerializes. It's currently unknown where SCP-3456 takes its victims, or what happens to them once it dematerializes, nor is it known how many victims 3456 needs to capture before it is satisfied and dematerializes for good, as the number taken has varied between instances. It's not currently understood why, but SCP-3456 is either unwilling or unable to cross bodies of fresh water, and making it to the other side of a freshwater source like a river, lake, or even a stream is the only currently known way to escape the anomaly once it begins its pursuit. Instances of SCP-3456 typically appear near sites of mass human suffering, such as battlefields and natural or man-made disasters. And there have been numerous reports and sightings of 3456s at historical events throughout the 19th, 20th, and 21st centuries, with multiple manifestations often appearing at the same event. One Foundation report contains an account of an SCP-3456 instance appearing during the First World War at the Battle of the Somme. Rumors spread through the British troops in their trenches of the appearance of a mythical creature many believed to be the Nukkalavi, a horse-like demon with origins in Orcadian mythology. Like many SCPs, this ancient folktale turned out to have very real origins. British infantryman Dave Harkand kept a journal which described giant hoofprints appearing in the battlefield mud, and soldiers disappearing under mysterious circumstances, appearing to be killed by forces even more terrifying than what the war could produce. Harkand describes one soldier who was firing on advancing Germans when the mud beneath his feet started boiling. Before anyone could react, mud went flying everywhere, and everyone was knocked off their feet. The soldier was gone, not even a body part remained, and Harkand was sure he saw bony protrusions reaching up out of the mud underneath the soldier just before he disappeared. Not long after, Harkand spotted the Orcadian horseman on the battlefield, and the horseman spotted Harkand. He watched as the instance of SCP-3456 picked bodies out of the mud and carried them off into the darkness. He took several shots at the entity with his rifle, but the bullets had no effect. As days passed, the half-man, half-horse continued to appear night after night, always doing the same thing, picking up injured soldiers off the battlefield and taking them into the darkness. It would always look back at Harkand, seemingly taunting him or inviting him to try following it. Soon more instances of SCP-3456 appeared, many with more than one torso on their back. And then they began laying traps, burying themselves in the mud and waiting for the soldiers to rush over them. Dave Harkand was declared missing in action at the Battle of the Somme, and it's presumed he was taken by the same instance of SCP-3456 that he first observed. Another first-hand account of an encounter with SCP-3456 occurred following the 2011 earthquake and subsequent nuclear disaster in Fukushima, Japan. With over 2,500 missing persons, several manifestations of SCP-3456 were reported in the areas affected by the quake, and SCP Foundation reconnaissance teams were sent to investigate, two of which were quickly wiped out during the encounters with 3456s. One squad, after exploring the evacuated city and not finding anything, spotted an instance of SCP-3456 standing motionless in the middle of an intersection. As they laid eyes on the Orcadian horseman, the human torso that was hanging limp off the motionless horse's body stood upright and began swinging its arms, damaging and destroying the buildings and structures around it. It then turned towards the team and emitted an ear-shatteringly loud shriek from the hole where its nose should be, before beginning its pursuit. The team immediately began evacuation procedures, even ordering a drone strike in an attempt to slow down the chasing anomaly. The team took shelter in an abandoned high-rise building, but knew their only chance of escape was if they could make it over the nearest body of fresh water, which would mean crossing a bridge over the Arakawa River, which was a kilometer away. The team was 50 yards away from the bridge with no further signs of SCP-3456 when one emerged from a side street right next to them. Small arms fire was used against the creature, and 2 rocket-propelled grenades were fired at it, but all had no effect. A flashbang detonated in the anomaly's face bought enough time for some of the squad to make it across the bridge and escape, but 2 members of the team were carried away by SCP-3456, with the last image captured by one of the squad's helmet-mounted cams being a shot of the Orcadian horseman smiling just before it demanifested. SCP-3456 is currently uncontained, and due to its extremely dangerous nature and the lack of any containment procedures, it has been designated Keter Class. Any personnel who observe the entity are to be treated with Class G amnestics, and their assigned treatment facility must be located within 1 kilometer of a body of fresh water. The Foundation has an ongoing project to attribute any historical references to SCP-3456 to myth, shell shock, hysteria, or PTSD, and any reports of loss of life or property damage involving the anomaly are to be replaced with explanations that attribute the cause to other natural or man-made events. Regions where SCP-3456 is more likely to appear are to be closely monitored with personnel ready to assist in evacuation efforts. But above all else, direct observation of SCP-3456 must be avoided, since once that has happened, there's very little even the SCP Foundation can do to protect you. A child is sleeping happily in their bed, dreaming of Christmas morning. What they don't hear, as they sleep, is the sound of SCP-4666 slipping into their room. SCP-4666 watches the child for just a moment before reaching into a giant bag. Hi, I'm Dr. Bob, and this is SCP-4666, also known as the YULE Man. SCP-4666 is thought to be a single humanoid entity, but one that has been alive for an incredibly long time. Those who have come into contact with SCP-4666 and lived to tell the tale describe him as being very tall, between 2 and 2.3 meters. He also appears to be very old and very thin. He always appears without clothing, even when the weather is below freezing and would be much too cold for any normal human to survive. Though the true extent of his anomalous properties are still unknown, SCP-4666 seems to be able to travel instantaneously to any location on Earth above the 40th line of north latitude, and may actually be able to travel anywhere on the planet. Encounters with SCP-4666 have only been reported during a very specific time of year, a period of 12 nights running from the night of December 21st to the early morning hours of January 2nd. This period is known as SCP-4666's active phase, and the encounters with the anomalous humanoid creature have been termed Weissnacht events. During these events, SCP-4666 appears at family dwellings, all of which, so far, have a few things in common. 1. They are all isolated in rural areas. 2. They are in locations with snow that covers the area for the duration of the event. And 3. They are all home to a family with at least one child under the age of 8. In places that match all of those characteristics, Weissnacht events sometimes occur and always follow the same basic progression. During the first 7 nights, the children will report seeing a strange figure within the vicinity of the home. The entity will seem to be watching the home from a distance, such as from across a field or from the edge of a nearby forest. Some children have even reported waking up at night to find SCP-4666 watching them sleep through a window. On nights 8 through 11, other family members will report hearing the entity, such as footsteps on the roof or in the attic. A bad-smelling odor will also start to be noticed in the house, but no source of the smell is ever found. These strange occurrences will often lead the family to think their house may be haunted, or that they're being terrorized by a madman. Finally, on the 12th night, one of 2 scenarios can occur. In the first, which happens roughly 15% of the time, families will often report that they heard footsteps during the night inside of their house, but there is never any sign of forced entry like broken windows or doors. In the morning, the children will find crudely made toys at the foot of their beds. For the lucky ones, this is the end of the Weissnacht event for them. The roughly 85% who experience the other scenario are considerably less lucky. In the vast majority of cases, the 12th night is a horrible experience. SCP-4666 still enters the home on the final night, but rather than leave presents for the children, it incapacitates the family and moves them all into a single room, where it proceeds to kill them one by one in view of the rest of the family. The exact method of killing varies from event to event, but there's almost always an element of torture that occurs before they are finally killed, and this torture may serve a ritualistic purpose. The entire family is killed except for one of the children who is under the age of 8. This child is instead abducted and placed into a giant bag SCP-4666 carries with it. SCP-4666's existence was first noted in 1974 by the Foundation's then-new Anomalous Signature Recognition Program, which alerted the Foundation to several suspiciously similar home invasions and murders that occurred throughout the Northern Hemisphere on the night of January 1st. Further research uncovered evidence for what was most likely other Weissnacht events every single year, dating back all the way to the late 18th century, with there being, on average, a little more than 3 events per year. And there's even been evidence of references to what may be SCP-4666, dating all the way back to the 1st and 2nd century AD. Identical fingerprints have been found at all of the houses which match the conditions for Weissnacht events, and have been matched to a recovered partial print from all the way back in 1873. These fingerprints have characteristics that don't match any known human fingerprints, and the human-like white hairs that have also been recovered do not appear to contain human DNA, or any DNA at all for that matter. In the rare Weissnacht events where SCP-4666 does not murder the family and gifts are left behind, the gifts are anything but normal. The gifts, known as SCP-4666-As, appear to be made from the bodies of children that SCP-4666 abducted from other homes. In one case, from 2018, at the home of a family in Alaska, a life-size doll made from the body of a female child was left behind. The doll was wearing a dirty dress made from sewn-together rags that was in some places sewn directly to the skin. Her mouth had been sewn shut and painted red with human blood. Another child's fingernails had been glued over her own, and 3 fingers were missing completely. The scalp had also been replaced with another child's scalp and hair like a crude wig. Worst of all, both eyes had been removed and replaced with 2 stones which were painted to look like eyes. But most frightening of all was that the child who had been turned into a doll was somehow still alive. Authorities took the girl to a hospital where she was able to give a brief interview. She explained that the man who abducted her had killed her parents before putting her into a giant bag where there were other children too. SCP-4666 took the children somewhere deep below the earth in a cave system full of ice and bones. There, they were forced to make crude toys until they couldn't go on any longer, at which point they became toys. The girl, now known to be Ekaterina Morozova, had been abducted 2 years previously in a known Weissnacht event. She survived for only 18 hours after being discovered. An autopsy revealed many terrible injuries, and the cause of death was found to be from severe, sustained malnourishment. SCP-4666 has been classified as Keter and is currently not contained. The Foundation monitors web traffic and law enforcement channels for any evidence of SCP-4666 activity, and especially any potential Weissnacht events, such as cases of stalking reported during the 12-night active phase or other strange phenomena at houses with young children. Should a Weissnacht event be suspected to be in progress, the nearest containment task force is dispatched to attempt to contain SCP-4666 using the standard PDP-8 humanoid first contact protocols. So far, no such containment attempt has been successful. It's late at night, and you're driving down a desolate stretch of highway somewhere in New Mexico. There's nothing out here except for you, your car, and the road. What you don't know is that you're about to encounter something. Something terrifying. There's no moon, and the sky is pitch black. Your own car is barely lighting up the dark road ahead of you. Just then, you spot something in your rearview mirror. It's a pair of headlights. There's nothing too strange about them, except that they are especially bright. Your eyes are so adjusted to the darkness that you have to look away. When you glance in the mirror again, you see that they're closer. Much closer. They must be going awfully fast. You don't know why, but something about the car behind you makes you feel uneasy. There's something off. You speed up a little. Maybe you can keep some distance from them, but the lights keep getting closer. So you speed up a little more. Still, they gain on you, growing bigger and bigger in your rearview mirror. You're getting nervous. They look like they are barreling right towards you. You floor it. The lights are able to keep up easily, though, and now they're right on your tail. No matter how fast you go, they stay right behind you. The lights are so bright and close that they're almost blinding. You're in a full-blown panic. What is going on? Now the lights are swerving back and forth behind you. What do they want? You take a sharp turn without indicating, but they follow you without difficulty. You keep your foot smashed down on the accelerator. Your engine is screaming, but they just get closer and closer. They're right on your bumper. The bright white lights burn your eyes so bad that you swat at the rearview mirror to point it down. You look up just in time to see the deer standing in the middle of the road. You slam on your brakes as hard as you can. Your tires squeal loudly in the night, and you brace yourself to both hit the deer and get rear-ended from behind. You stop inches from the deer as something incredible happens. The two headlights seem to split, passing by you on either side of your car. You and the deer lock eyes for a split second as if you're both thinking, "What was that?" before the deer hops away into the night. You don't know what's happening, but you're not going to wait around to find out. You throw the car in reverse and hit the gas before whipping it around 180 degrees. You can't remember how far the last town was, but there's no chance you're going in the direction of those lights. You drive as fast as you can, checking your mirror constantly to see if anything is behind you. Nothing. Just darkness. Maybe you're finally safe. No, they're right in front of you. The lights somehow appear out of nowhere right in front of your car. You turn the wheel hard to avoid a head-on collision and you go flying off the road, smashing your head against the window as the car goes flipping and rolling and tumbling. The car comes to a stop 100 feet off the road, upside down, with a lone blinking turn signal dimly lighting up the surrounding field. A single headlight approaches the car, but it's not moving like a vehicle. It's moving like an animal. You're concussed from the accident, and your vision is starting to fade. The last thing you see is a second light approaching. The next morning, the local sheriff is investigating the scene of a single car accident. Curiously, there's no body, just a few scraps of clothing and a pair of tennis shoes sitting neatly in the upside-down roof of the car. Strangest, though, are the childlike handprints all over the dirty car door. The sheriff doesn't know what to think. What the sheriff doesn't know is that he has just come upon the aftermath of an SCP-745 attack, a strange and mysterious creature known as the Headlights. SCP-745 is the classification the SCP Foundation has given to a bipedal nocturnal predator whose hunting grounds are an abandoned stretch of highway in northern New Mexico. SCP-745's most distinctive feature by far is its head, the top of which is a bloated sack of translucent skin. There are no visible sensory organs present on the head, nor does it appear to have a solid skull, and the creature's brain can be directly seen through the semi-transparent skin, which is covered in a web of bioluminescent organs. These organs are capable of producing a steady output of light that's been measured between 1400 to 3200 lumens, which is the equivalent of bright xenon gas headlights. The entity has been observed to have the ability to change the color of this light, as well as flash it in specific patterns. It is theorized that it engages in this behavior as a way to defend itself, and potentially may also use it as a way to communicate with other members of its species. The rest of SCP-745's body is covered in skin that is a deep, dark, black color that almost seems to absorb light. This quality, when paired with their blindingly bright head protrusion, gives the appearance of a floating point of light in the darkness. Because SCP-745 entities hunt almost exclusively in pairs, with their preferred hunting grounds being remote sections of highway, they are easily mistaken for oncoming or approaching headlights. Two SCP-745 entities are able to move together in perfect synchronicity, running in tandem at speeds up to 180 kilometers per hour. Together, they will target lone vehicles that they spot on the highway, and will begin to chase or run straight towards them, giving the unlucky driver the impression that a fast-moving car is rapidly approaching them. After they near the targeted car, they will attempt to stop it by any means necessary, whether by simply forcing the driver to pull over out of fear, or by running them off the road completely. Once their prey has stopped, crashed, or become otherwise incapacitated, the pair will stop moving together and approach the car separately to directly assault and then consume the vehicle's occupants. Next to no remains are left following an attack, save for a few scraps of clothing in the victim's shoes. Other than the damage sustained during the accident, there is never any other sign of struggle or forced entry, with the only other evidence left at the scene being the childlike handprints from SCP-745's small front paws. Strangely, analysis of SCP-745's genetic structure has revealed that unlike humans, they are not a carbon-based life form, meaning it is unlikely then that they are able to derive any nutrition from the consuming of human flesh. It is theorized then that they may be hunting solely for sport or some other form of perverse enjoyment. This question remains unanswered, as currently there are no recorded observations of SCP-745 feeding in the wild, as successful attacks have never left any witnesses, and specimens captured by the SCP Foundation refuse to eat at all. No lairs, nests, or other refuge of SCP-745 has ever been found, nor has the Foundation located any breeding grounds or young examples of the entity. It's unknown how or if they reproduce, or when they may have first appeared. What is known is that they had established a wide hunting territory across the American Southwest until Foundation teams began a program to thin their numbers in the 1960s. The effort appears to have been successful so far, and all recent sightings of SCP-745 have been limited to a specific stretch of highway in northern New Mexico. SCP-745 has been classified as Euclid, and in order to limit potential exposure to civilians, the Foundation has purchased the land surrounding the highway, with traffic being redirected to other roads. Foundation security teams disguised as highway patrol officers are to remove any trespassers or lost travelers who accidentally find themselves on the dangerous stretch of highway. The security teams are also tasked with attempting to capture any instances of SCP-745 that they can, and any recovered creatures, live or dead, are to be loaded into Class 3 BCU storage containers and transferred to Site-17 for further study. Containment procedures that are able to preserve living specimens are still being researched, and currently, no examples of SCP-745 have survived for more than a week in captivity. However, seeing as there have been no new sightings of SCP-745 outside of the isolated and monitored stretch of highway, and all reports of phantom lights elsewhere in the country have not pointed to evidence of additional SCP-745 outbreaks, they are considered to be effectively contained. A pair of SCP Foundation researchers open the door of a containment cell and find themselves staring at something unlike anything they've ever seen before. Sitting in the middle of the room is a giant lump that appears to be made of what can only be described as flesh. The two look at each other in disbelief. Just what is this thing? They circle the huge blob, looking it over, wondering what on earth it could be. One of the researchers finally gets the courage to actually feel it. He finds that it's warm to the touch. And does he detect some slight movement? He slowly moves to place his ear against it to listen, but a sudden shudder from the mass sends him jumping back in fright. Just then, the other researcher calls to him from the other side of the sphere. It sounds like he has found something. As he approaches, he too sees what caused his partner to call out. There, in the middle of this tumorous ball, is a door. It's a circular iron hatch, the kind sealed by a valve, and it's open. Now the researchers are really confused. A massive lump of living flesh is strange enough, but why does it have a door? One of the researchers peeks inside. Is that a couch they see? And a table? Does someone live in this thing? Things are getting beyond strange. The two researchers look up at the observation window where their supervisor is watching them. The supervisor does not hesitate. He nods at them, and the researchers know what they must do. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. The researcher who lost winces. He knew that coming to work at the SCP Foundation meant that he would be dealing with some strange, dangerous, and disgusting anomalies, but he never imagined he would have to climb inside a giant orb of meat. His partner opens the hatch all the way and offers a hand to help him. Knowing he has no other option, the researcher steps inside. Inside, the air is hot, thick, and moist, like a cramped gym that's had too many bodies exerting themselves on a warm, humid day. He walks through the short entranceway, and his eyes adjust to the dim light to find that he's standing in the middle of a cozy little room. A single, small lamp on a table is giving off just enough light for him to see that the room is sparsely furnished, with a few pieces including a small couch and a twin bed. Outside, his partner calls to him, asking what he can see. As the researcher turns to answer, the door snaps shut. The valve spins on its own, locking itself tight. Try as he might, The researcher can't get it to budge. He bangs on the door and yells, "Is he all right in there? Is everything okay?" His only response is a muffled scream from inside the ball of flesh. He keeps pulling at the door, twisting the valve with all of his strength, but it won't move. The sounds of gurgles and wet sloshing come from inside the meaty growth. An alarm starts to sound as he strains against the door, exerting himself so hard that he feels like a vein in his head might burst. Suddenly, the valve loosens, and the sudden lack of resistance causes him to fall to the floor. The valve spins on its own, and the door swings open once again. The ball of flesh is quiet once more. The researcher picks himself up off the ground and slowly, carefully, peeks inside. "Hello? Are you okay? Is anyone in there?" There's no response. That is, until a blast of hot air comes rushing out of the hatch, blowing the researcher's hair back. When it's over, he peeks inside again. His fellow researcher is nowhere to be seen. Inside is the same couch, bed, and table with a small lamp. But there's something new there, too. Across from the couch, where there was nothing before, is a small television. While this may seem strange, it's just another day at the SCP Foundation, where anomalous objects and creatures are studied and contained, including SCP-002, also known as the Living Room. SCP-002 is the designation given to a large, tumorous, fleshy growth. It's roughly spherical, with a circumference just over 15 meters, giving it an estimated volume of around 60 meters cubed. Located on one side is an iron valve hatch, similar to what might be found on an old submarine, which leads into the interior of the ball. Those who step inside are surprised to discover a small room that resembles a low-rent studio apartment, complete with furniture and even a small window. Strangely, the outside of the ball of flesh shows no windows, and indeed no openings at all, save for the iron hatch. The furniture in the room displays no anomalous properties, though examination has revealed that the furniture appears to be constructed of sculpted bone, woven hair, and other biological substances, all coming from human bodies. Analysis of samples taken from the furniture has shown each to be constructed from independent and fragmented DNA sequences, several of which correspond to SCP research personnel who have been lost inside of SCP-002. To date, the Living Room has been responsible for 7 members of staff going missing. At the same time, during the course of its containment at the SCP Foundation, the room appears to have added multiple additional furnishings, including 2 lamps, a throw rug, a television, a radio, a beanbag chair, 3 books in an unknown language, 4 children's toys, and a small potted plant. Tests have been performed using a variety of non-human entities in order to see if they would provoke a similar response from SCP-002 to that of humans. Various lab animals, including those with close DNA to humans such as chimpanzees, have been placed in the room. But so far, all have failed to make the Living Room react. Human cadavers were also tested, but they too did not produce any effect. It is unknown what causes SCP-002 to engage in its behavior, but whatever process it uses to convert organic matter into furnishings seems to only be triggered by the presence of living human beings. SCP-002 was discovered in northern Portugal, following reports of an object falling from Earth's orbit. There, in the bottom of a small crater, was SCP-002. It was encased in a thick shell of rock, but the anomaly's fleshy exterior could be seen through cracks that were likely created by the impact. A local farmer was the first to spot the object falling to Earth and brought word of what he found to his village. At the same time, a Level 4 SCP Foundation agent stationed in the area detected elevated levels of radioactivity and traced the source back to the crater. An SCP collection squad led by General Mulhausen was dispatched to the impact site and quickly secured the area. Test subjects from the nearby village were recruited for initial analysis of the object, with 3 men being individually sent inside of SCP-002, all of whom disappeared. Having confirmed this anomaly's deadly properties, General Mulhausen then issued a Level 4A termination order that would apply to any local witnesses in order to ensure that no knowledge of the object reached the outside world. He then oversaw its transport to an SCP containment facility. As Foundation staff prepped SCP-002 for relocation, 4 members of the security personnel were seemingly mesmerized and drawn inside the object where they too disappeared. This was the first hint that SCP-002 possesses some form of subtle mind control, with the ability to influence humans into stepping inside of it. It was after these losses that it was first noticed that the object appeared to grow new furnishings, following someone disappearing inside. After these mishaps, General Mulhausen ordered all staff to wear hazmat suits when dealing with SCP-002, and following the General's own termination, SCP-002 was placed in containment at the secure facility where it currently resides. Due to the ongoing danger presented by SCP-002, the risk it poses to any who step inside of it, and the mind control abilities it possesses, it has been classified as Euclid. It is to remain connected at all times to a suitable power supply to keep it in a charging mode of some kind, which appears to make it more docile. In the event of a power outage, staff in the immediate area are to be evacuated and the object's containment cell emergency barrier is to be closed, sealing it off from the rest of the site. Once power is reestablished, strobing X-ray and ultraviolet lights are to be activated in the containment cell until SCP-002 is returned to its charging mode. Research teams investigating SCP-002 that will come within 20 meters of the object must consist of no fewer than 2 members. Personnel should also maintain physical contact with one another at all times to confirm that the other is present and not experiencing any feelings of confusion, dulled perception, or other forms of bewilderment that may lead to them entering the living room. No personnel at all below a Level 3 clearance are allowed inside of SCP-002, and any staff that have contact with the anomaly are to be escorted no less than 5 kilometers away and must undergo a 72-hour quarantine and psychological evaluation. SCP-002 is one of the oldest anomalies in the SCP Foundation database, but remains one of the least understood. Perhaps one day we'll understand what it is and why it was at one time sitting in the orbit of Earth. Did someone send it here, intending us to one day find it? Did it come here of its own volition? Or did we put it there ourselves, in an attempt to keep it away?